We just wanted to take a moment to say we see you. You're a fan of Tradeoffs, and we appreciate that. And a really great way for fans such as yourself to help this nonprofit newsroom is by taking our audience survey. Your feedback really is critical to all that we do here. It helps us evaluate our performance, understand how we can serve you better, and it helps us measure the impact of our reporting. Your insights are invaluable to our organization. So please, go to tradeoffs.org now to take our survey. It should only take you a couple of minutes to complete. And thanks for your help.
Hey, it's Dan. We're producing a special episode in light of yesterday's important ruling on abortion. On June 27th, the Supreme Court cleared the way for hospitals in Idaho to temporarily continue performing emergency abortions when a woman's health is at risk. It's the second of two big abortion rulings to come down this month, with major consequences for state and federal policy and the health and safety of millions of people. The other decision preserved access to a widely used medication, at least for now. Today, health reporter Shefali Luthra helps put this pair of rulings into context. From the studio at the Leonard Davis Institute at the University of Pennsylvania, I'm Dan Gorenstein. This is Tradeoffs. Shefali Luthra is a former correspondent for Kaiser Health News. She now reports for The 19th, a nonprofit newsroom that covers gender and policy, and has published a book, Undue Burden, on the impact of Roe's repeal. Shefali was just at a conference on a panel at USC in Los Angeles when we spoke to her a few hours after yesterday's ruling. Shefali, how are you? Good afternoon.
I am doing all right. It's good to be with you.
So, it's been 2 years since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, eliminating the federal right to abortion in America. What evolved in its place, as you know, is a confusing patchwork of state and federal policies and a whole mess of lawsuits, some winding their way up to the highest court in the land. So, Shefali, let's start with the decision that just came out this week, first by accident on Wednesday.
We've just learned, thanks to reporting by Bloomberg News, that the court earlier today mistakenly posted what appeared to be an opinion.
The document appears to be a majority opinion.
That was insane, right?
It was crazy. It really was, as if someone or someone's just can't keep Supreme Court decisions on abortion under wraps until they're meant to be published, because Dobbs 2 years ago was also leaked, and now here we are with this opinion being accidentally published a full day before the court means to put it out there.
So let's tee this case up. Moyle versus United States. Basically, the question in front of the court was to resolve this fundamental clash between federal and state laws. This federal law, known as EMTALA, requires any hospital that gets money from Medicare to care for a patient that shows up in a medical emergency. The state law is Idaho's strict abortion ban that prohibits docs from performing abortions unless a pregnant woman's life, not just her health, is at risk. As you wrote in your article, the court punted on this key question. So what now?
What now is, this case continues to make its way through the courts. For now, EMTALA protects the right to an abortion in medical emergencies in Idaho, as it is meant to do across the country. But this uncertainty, this ambiguity for healthcare providers and patients remains because there is no definitive answer as to how these different laws interact. And on top of that, we have questions about, will the federal government change? Will we have a Trump administration and a Department of Justice that interprets EMTALA differently? And does that change the case further? There is just so much more that we'll have to watch. And in the meantime, people's lives and healths will be hanging in the balance.
And any sense at this early moment of how long it might take for the lower courts to reach a final verdict, which is what the Supreme Court did by effectively just saying, we're not going to make the decision, we're going to send it back down?
Frankly, I think people are so stunned by this decision that we don't really know how long it will take. In her opinion, which was part concurrence, part dissent, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson suggested that the court could very well hear this case again in a couple of years. Whether that is an accurate time, I think remains to be seen.
So obviously this case is focused on Idaho, but other states have similar strict bans. In your mind, what ripple effects do you think this decision is going to have across the country?
I think what this does is it leaves uncertainty for healthcare providers, and arguably it emboldens certain states to continue to try to restrict access to abortion in states where they have these bans that have exceptions for life, but maybe are less forgiving on health. I think there's a real world where they look at this decision and they feel justified in that interpretation and try and continue to deny people access to abortion in medical emergencies.
You say you believe this could embolden more conservative states that are interested in restricting abortion access, but do you think it could have the opposite result too? I mean, like ultimately, Idaho, as of this ruling, Idaho must continue to provide emergency abortions.
It's a good question, and this is where we get into the levers of how EMTALA has actually been enforced. When we look at the number of complaints that have been filed, and then in turn the number of hospitals that have been penalized for potentially violating EMTALA, very, very few penalties have been issued, and some complaints have been rejected by the Biden administration. So in theory, we have this ruling in Idaho that, upholds EMTALA's protection to abortion. But when we look in reality at how it's enforced, there are still real questions about whether physicians and hospitals are actually given the legal comfort that they need to provide care in moments when patients require it for their health.
Now, I gotta imagine that emergency room docs are not the only ones facing tough choices in this new post-Roe reality. I'm curious, Shefali, if based off of your reporting, you can give us another example of a difficult decision that other providers will continue to wrestle with even once this Idaho case eventually gets resolved.
One that comes up often is pregnant patients who have cancer, because very often when you are pregnant, you cannot undergo chemotherapy. And essentially, the cancer is not immediately life-threatening, but you cannot access the healthcare that would be appropriate because of the abortion ban, because of your pregnancy. And I've spoken to so many doctors who simply don't have an answer to this. They can try and appeal to their hospital ethics boards and sometimes get abortions approved, but in other cases, they send pregnant patients with cancer out of state to get an abortion so that they can then come home and get cancer treatment. It's something that would have been unthinkable in the past, and it's something we're living with now and will continue to live with.
After the break, we turn to the court's other big June ruling on abortion.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month slows. Full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hey, it's Shannon Crane from the Tradeoffs audience team. This year, we're taking some new steps to hear from you, our listeners. Back in March, we asked folks to share their experiences with how the U.S. healthcare system treats people with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Seeing how broken the system is firsthand, where everyone tells you to go to a different place, they send you in circles, no one returns your calls.
I think that we mistakenly believe that sterilization of people with disabilities is in the past. It is not.
Thanks to everyone who took the time to share their stories. Your experiences are a part of our healthcare system, and they're already giving us new reporting ideas and fresh perspectives. Expect more questions from us soon, and in the meantime, you can always reach us at info@tradeoffs.org or leave us a voicemail at 215-703-8255. Again, the number is 215-703-8255.
We're back with health reporter Shefali Luthra breaking down the Supreme Court's first major rulings on abortion since overturning Roe 2 years ago. Let's turn to the other big ruling, Shefali, from earlier this month, weighing in on people's access to a common abortion pill. More than half of all abortions in the U.S. now involve this pill known as mifepristone. Here, the court ruled 9-0 in favor of leaving the status quo alone. What actually is the status quo?
The status quo is that abortion is legal in some parts of the country and illegal in many others, and that includes access to mifepristone. 14 states right now ban abortion throughout pregnancy with very limited exceptions. 3 more ban abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy, which is quite early. This means that if you live in many of those states, including Texas and Florida, 2 of the biggest states in the country, you still can't get an abortion in the place that you live. You either have to travel out of state for an abortion or try to order pills through the mail from a doctor in a different state and hope that you will get them. And these are very effective mechanisms for circumventing abortion bans, but they are not risk-free. They are not without their own complications and challenges. Where we are still is in a patchwork system where the story of abortion is increasingly becoming one of inequality, and some people are able to access it, some people are able to circumvent abortion bans, and still others are not.
It seems like these battles over the pill are far from over, just as you alluded to there. I'm assuming we're going to see more lawsuits, more moves from state lawmakers. When it comes to this next frontier on pills, Shefali, what are you going to be watching for most? Like when you prioritize, because there's lots.
I mean, you're right. There is so much. I'll be watching the courts, but immediately I'll be watching state legislatures, because we have already seen lawmakers try and pass bills and laws that would find ways to stop telemedicine, stop people from prescribing and mailing medication to people in places with abortion bans. They've been very frustrated because they view medication abortion as an existential threat to their abortion bans. There's been a real hesitation to criminalize pregnant people, but I'm very curious to see if that changes in the face of how ubiquitous medication abortion has become.
To close, I'd really like to circle back to this question of tough choices. I know that you followed a number of people over the last couple of years since the fall of Roe v. Wade with your reporting in your book. Is there a patient that you're thinking of who's still going to be left with a tough decision in light of either of these 2 rulings?
I thought a lot this week about a physician I met from Texas, and I wrote about him in a story for the 19th. This was after Texas's 6-week abortion ban took effect. And he saw a woman, she had twins, they were wanted twins, and then one fetus experienced complications and the other's amniotic sac rupture. She was not going to give birth to babies that would live. But she was 15 weeks pregnant and could not get an abortion in Texas. And they could see that this was a threat to her health, but it was not an immediate threat to her life. And so they sent her home to wait. And she waited, and she came back a few days later, and she had developed septic shock. And she stayed in the ICU for 2 weeks, and she suffered permanent kidney damage. Within a year of that, the doctor knew she would require a kidney transplant to live. And I think about that because these are the hard choices we are asking doctors to make. When is sick too sick? When do you intervene when you know that someone will deteriorate or are fairly sure they'll deteriorate without an abortion, but you can't say 100%. And as a result, they suffer long-term health implications that could affect them for the rest of their lives, that could ultimately mean they live shorter lives. And I think that we will still not see a resolution to those kinds of questions for a very long time.
Shefali, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us on Tradeoffs.
Thank you for having me.
With this year's Supreme Court abortion rulings behind us, attention now turns to the election, when voters will weigh in on the issue in the presidential race and a handful of state ballot measures, all with huge implications for the future of reproductive health in America. For more coverage on these cases and what's on tap in November, check out the links in our show notes and other resources on our website, tradeoffs.org. I'm Dan Gorenstein. This is Tradeoffs.
Today's top story, the flavor merger of the century between the Peanut Butter Group and Chocolatey Corp. Joining me is a PBC executive.
Thanks for having me, Barry.
Now, how did you know the merger and the byproduct of it, Jif peanut butter and chocolate flavored spread, would be a success?
You know, it was a gut feeling, a rumbling, if you will. Besides, they're two titans of taste.
Very true. Goes great with pretzels.
And pancakes.
Apples too, I bet. Try Jif PBC today.